Hello buds! Don't Starve Together pretty recently turned officially 10 years old. And I thought, what better way to celebrate than go back and talk about each and every year that the game had in its upbringing, its updates and additions. And of course, we're gonna rank them because I know everybody loves ranking videos. Let's go ahead and begin our trip through memory lane. Whoa, wait a minute, 2014? What? Last I checked it was 2026, not 2024. Yeah, that's right, I lied to you. I spread misinformation on the internet. No, but actually, Don't Starve's official release was in 2016, so legally it has been out for 10 years. However, I thought it would be unfair to not include its beta years. 2014 was a relatively tame year for Don't Starve Together, seeing as it was its inception year. Back then, Don't Starve Together was much more akin to vanilla Don't Starve, with only 2 seasons, and it only received 2 actual content updates through this year. Stuck in the Middle of Ew would add the Ewikis that we all know and love today, alongside Vargs. Then the second update was In With the New, which was an update that added meteors, a still relevant and somewhat hated feature for Mega Basers. Moon rocks were added also, which at the time I believe did nothing. Now, I'll admit, I didn't get to play Don't Starve's beta years because at the time I was still a console plebeian, but even I'll admit that it's kind of crazy that the framework that 2014 set is still used to this day. It was a small year for sure, but still very important. I'll go ahead and rank this a D tier year. It was necessary, but overall, there was nothing too great. There was definitely worse and there were better years, despite the lack of content overall. But really, it's not Clay's fault. This whole year was filled with tons of framework updates which were crucial. So the lack on content is completely understandable. And it's why I'd rather give this a D tier than an F tier, because I would feel so bad giving Don't Starve Together a F tier on its very first year. 2015 was yet another beta year, but this time it added some things that were a little more important and cool. The first major content update the game received this year was the caves as a whole. Yeah, that's right. Unlike Don't Starve Vanilla, Don't Starve Together didn't ship out immediately with caves. Although I guess you could say it hasn't shipped yet, this was still a beta year after all. But it was a huge addition, nonetheless. They managed to fit the caves in perfectly for the multiplayer experience, and I still actually prefer Don't Starve Together's cave layout over Don't Starve single players. I enjoy the seamless feel to it, it's kinda nice. But maybe it was overshadowed by the second edition, which was Reign of Giants. Yeah, that's right, the paid DLC for Don't Starve single player just came free with Don't Starve Together. Well, okay, not free because you would eventually have to buy Don't Starve Together, but still it was a massive update. Imagine if Don't Starve Together still only had winter and summer. Yeah, this year was definitely an A tier. The only thing holding it back from an S tier is that, most of the stuff was kind of just reused from the single player version, but it was still probably some of the most content introduced, period. And finally, it's time to talk about release year. Now you're going to start seeing much more activity when it comes to updates and content. It's also when I actually started playing the game as it released on consoles not long after it released on Steam. Also, keep in mind, since there's more updates here, they may not be in total order, and I'll probably skip some of the smaller updates because, this is more of an overview video. Either way, this year's major update gave us the first part of the new Reign content line. It came with Toadstool, Bee Queen, the shadow pieces, new decorative items, the whole pet mechanic was added, and even some sweet quality of life things like moon lenses and beefalo taming. Unfortunately, it did also introduce Disease, which was a widely hated mechanic, but that would eventually be patched out in future updates, but it would stay around for, I think, like 4 years? Yeah, it was around 4 years because it was removed in 2020. And this content line is to blame for that, sadly, so it's gonna drag this year's rating down significantly. If you started playing Don't Starve Together after 2020 and never had to deal with this mechanic, consider yourself lucky because Disease was just so tedious and dumb. I don't understand what they were doing with it. This year also marked the start of seasonal events. We got the very first Hollow Knights event and the very first Winter's Feast event, which actually came with a mainline boss, Klaus. These would return every year, usually with minor new content, but sometimes not. For now, they were pretty awesome. This year was great, especially because it was Don't Starve Together's first year being truly alive, but it did mark the start of disease. Overall, I'd say this was a B tier year, despite that. Just because it was the start of many things doesn't make it overwhelmingly great. And yeah, disease wasn't that bad, but like I said, it was a pretty horrible mechanic and will lower my ranking of this year. 2017 marked Don't Starve's second year of being an official game, and it got a few less but meatier updates. The new Rain arc ended this year by adding a new summer boss, Antlion, who continues to be a pain in the butt cheeks for Mega Basers all over, and a new final boss, Ancient Fuel Weaver. Oh yeah, also Winona came out this year, but back then she was mostly just Don't Starve Together's version of Wilson. She's much cooler now, don't get me wrong, but release Winona was pretty bad. This year also marked the start of the Year of Events. Events focusing on the Lunar New Year stuff. This year was the Year of the Gobbler, and it was alright. I mean, it was probably one of the more boring Year of Events, but it gets a pass because it was the first, so it laid the groundwork for future Year of Events. The absolute craziest thing this year, however, was the addition of the Forge, a new co-op horde defense minigame that many people to this day still miss. It was epic and awesome, and Clay, why did it have to be a limited time event? Ugh. Either way, this was a B tier year. If it wasn't for the Forge and the Ancient Fuel Weaver being added, two very cool things, it probably would have been a C tier year, because I'm not really that big of a fan of the ant guy. And Winona is cool, but again, she was really bad back then. 2018 was probably the smallest year when it came to actual in-game content. I could only find one instance of content actually being added to the mainline game, and that was literally just the Celestial Orb and its framework. However, when it comes to events, this year was pretty huge. The Year of the Varg released, which had some cool features. Hound taming and clay Vargs and hounds were introduced for a limited time. But the real treat was that we got the Gorge and the Forge Part 2 both in 1 year. Two very beloved game modes that wouldn't quite see their way into 2019. Sadly, this year didn't really mean much for the main game, but it was still a very cool year, if only for its duration. I'll give it a C tier. I can't in good faith give it anything lower because, the Gorge and Forge are so iconic, but I also can't go that higher, seeing as most of it was limited edition, so if you weren't around for this year, you didn't really get to benefit off of this year at all. 2019 was a huge turnaround though. Whereas 2018 had barely any mainline content, 2019 saw the addition of 2 entirely new characters, 2 single-player characters coming over to Don't Starve Together, and reworks for 3 of the already existing characters. That's basically like 7 new characters essentially. Wartox and Wirt released this year, adding to our monster character roster. Worley and Wormwood made their way over here from Shipwrecked and Hamlet respectively. And finally, Winona got a much needed refresh, turning her from DST Wilson into her own character with catapults and electricity. Willow went from trash F tier to C tier. She still didn't have her skill tree, but Bernie was pretty huge and made it so she didn't have to deal with sanity. It also removed her god-awful sanity fires if I remember correctly. And Woody got his 2 new wear forms, making him a jack of all trades. And that wasn't even all that this year provided. This year also saw the reworks of the oceans in its entirety. Now instead of inaccessible backdrops, oceans can be navigated with an entirely new naval mechanic. Building boats, sailing, all of it was brand new. At the time, the only new island was Lunar Island, but it still was a really cool addition and it introduced a brand new mechanic in the form of lunacy, a counterpart to insanity. This year also had the Year of the Pig King, which was one of the most loaded Year of events we've ever gotten, giving us a new pig wrestling minigame. This Year of events was one of the first to ever leave a lasting impact as well, as golden belts can still rarely be found even with the event turned off. This update year was by far one of the most feature-loaded, and I think it deserves a solid S tier. 2020. This was not a popular year for one big reason that I'm not sure I can even talk about on YouTube yet, despite it being 6 to 7 years old. I don't know. But it was actually a pretty good year for Don't Starve Together. 2 characters got reworks. Windy got her much needed extra Abigail control alongside new potions, Wigfrid got access to her battle songs, and a brand new character was released, Walter. But at the time, Walter kinda sucked, and that wouldn't change until, well, 5 years later in his skill tree, which we'll go ahead and talk about once we get there. This year also saw more improvements to the ocean. Pearl was added, and seaweeds now populated the ocean, giving more threats out at sea. The caves also got a rework, with the new Lunar Grotto adding a counterpart to the Lunar Island in the caves, alongside a mysterious archive, and everything that came with it. But the real best update? You're watching it right now. Farming was overhauled in the Reap What You Sow update, bringing with it a new farming mechanic that I've showcased a couple times on this channel. Seriously, it's a really cool system that puts even Stardew Valley's farming system to shame. The Year of event this year was the Year of the Carrat, which was a really cool event where you could race and train carrats. Overall, this year was cool, not as great as the prior year, but a solid A tier in my eyes. Lots of new goodies to play with. But I don't exactly know if we're beating 4 entire new characters in 1 year. That was insane. Okay, I guess it was only 2 new characters, but we have to consider the Shipwrecked and Hamlet bring over new. They got reworks and all that, so. 2021 was a year of even more character refreshes. Wes got his new balloons, Weber got his spider stuff, and Wolfgang got his bells and whistles. Quite literally, I might add. There was also a new character this year, which was Wanda. And lover or hater, you've got to admit she's a pretty fun character. Definitely a breath of fresh air for the roster. This year also saw the lunar side finally getting their very own endgame boss in the form of Celestial Champion. The ocean also got its hands on a new biome, the waterlogged biome, which came with the Mega Baser's favorite new fig tree. Seriously, where would we be without those figgy trees? They are pretty good. This was also the very first crossover year for Don't Starve Together, as we got the Terraria crossover, introducing the Eye of Cthulhu and the twins to the game, alongside the new Year of the Beefalo event, which was yet another banger when it came to Year of events, because we got another new minigame, which was really well made actually. But that wasn't all, man, there's still more. This year also was the first year to introduce the Midsummer Carnival, a fun little carnival themed event that would, you guessed it, return every midsummer. It was a ton of filler, but a lot of fun filler, okay? With minigames and the such. It would come back every year with a few more minigames or a little bit of new stuff, and overall I would give this year a solid A tier. It made both endgame players and mid-game players very happy. And I mean, the carnival was our first taste of luck-based mechanics. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe! 2022 was yet another year of character refreshes. This time, WX got access to their circuits, Wickerbottom got new books and a bookshelf, and Maxwell got the ability to completely undercut Wickerbottom while also getting some new stuff himself. This year also dealt with the ocean, adding the new Mooncay Island and a pseudo-new character in the form of Wonky. But it's less of a character and more of a transformation. A bad one too, since it's basically Wilbur without any of the stuff Wilbur can do, besides running, I guess. The stage was also added this year, but honestly, besides a few fun plays and stuff, it was just kind of filler in my eyes. This year's Year of event was the Year of the Catcoon, which saw you hunting down and taming cute little kitcoons to get your hands on some lucky gold pieces. This year felt far more tame than the previous ones, and honestly, a lot of the stuff it added, besides maybe the character refreshes, are easily forgotten, so I'm gonna give it a D tier. Sorry 2022, you just were not a banger. 2023. This was a very polarizing year for Don't Starve Together, and was a very endgame based year. We got both the Lunar and Shadow Rifts this year, providing a ton of extra post-game content. We got the Cult of the Lamb crossover, which was, incredibly forgettable. And we got by far the most controversial addition to the game, which was skill trees. Wilson was the first of this year, followed by Wormwood, Wolfgang, Woody, Wigfrid, and Willow. Wigfrid and Willow's skill tree also came with Frostjaw, but who really interacts with Frostjaw? I don't know. Now, I personally don't have any strong feelings about skill trees. I think they're alright, and some of them are actually pretty cool. But yeah, they are controversial, and a lot of people do believe that they ruined the game entirely. This year also had the Year of the Bunnyman, which brought a fun little arena minigame thing. It was weird. I don't know. Either way, I'm gonna rate this year a big fat B. Look, while I do enjoy early and mid-game content, and this year didn't really have any besides the skill trees, you have to admit this year was pretty packed with content. Rifts may be controversial, and most players may never interact with them, but for you late game players out there, what would you do without them? I mean, if it wasn't for Rifts, Dual Sight Crowns would still be considered among the best armors in the game, something you can get pretty early on. It was still a really good year for Don't Starve Together, all things considered, and I actually enjoyed the additions that it made. Now, do I believe skill trees make the game far easier for their respective characters? Absolutely. But easy does not mean it's not fun. Willow would be so boring without her Lunar Blast or her Shadow Flames, and it's not like this is a competitive game. Balance doesn't matter, especially because most players play this game single player anyway. Thankfully, if you don't like skill trees, you can just not use them. Although if you choose not to use them, I do wish there was a way to remove that stupid eye from the corner of your screen. That's the one big complaint I have. It feels like the game's trying to make you use the skill trees. I don't know. Either way, let's move on. This was a controversial year. 2024, on the other hand, well, it was not really good if I'm gonna be honest. Okay, so for characters, we got 2 skill trees this year, Wirt and Winona. And both of those were kind of mid. I'm sorry, but they just weren't all that memorable. And for mainline content, we got Scrappy Werepig, those weird trees that either give you night vision or gems that everybody also kind of forgot about, and the Depths of Duplicity, which was alright, I guess. It was more cave content, but not really the cave content everybody was craving. It was mostly endgame cave content. The Big Worm was cool though. The Year of the Dragonfly, while being a very cool event on its own, had almost nothing to do with the Dragonfly whatsoever. The only really cool thing this year had was the Hollowed Knights introduced a new parasite type enemy, which was cool, but it was locked behind rifts again. And it did have pumpkin carving and later snowman building, but that was really it for quote unquote early game content. And barely anyone really interacted with it, sadly. This year was honestly probably the worst in my opinion, and it's gonna get a solid F tier. It was a huge flop, but hey, it happens sometimes. 2025 was definitely a bit of an uptick from 2024. We got much more content, at least. 3 skill trees dropped, Walter, Windy, and Wartox, and almost all of these skill trees were absolute bangers. Walter's especially turned him into a powerhouse from being a mediocre character. And Wartox and Windy, well, they've always been pretty strong, so there's that. As for content, we got yet another crossover in the form of Jimbo, which allowed us to game in the constant, and then we got the start of 2 new finale bosses. Hostile Takeover introduced a new lunar endgame boss in the form of Warbot and Scion, and the Ancient Echoes formed the pre-work for a Shadow endgame boss. I don't know, pre-work's not the word I was trying to say. I think I was trying to say prep work. Either way, both of these are huge from a lore standpoint and a gameplay standpoint. Warbot and Scion are probably the most difficult bosses we have ever gotten since Fuel Weaver, and while some people may not like just how unfair they are, it's pretty cool to have another difficult challenger in the ring. The events this year were, they were alright. I mean, the Year of the Depths Worm was by far the worst Year of event. Yes, I actually preferred the Year of the Dragonfly event over this Year of event. I'm not even lying. This event just came with worm hunts. It had cool lanterns, so I'll give it that. The Winter's Feast did add a pretty cool new thing though, Pearl and her teas. But the same problem lies here. While teas are very powerful, I don't know if they deserve to be post rifts and post setting up Warbot. Still, this year had a ton of good going for it, so I'll give it a B tier. And that leaves us to year 10, where we're at right now. And I would say so far, about halfway through the year, things are going pretty good. We've had 1 skill tree and 1 event. WX just got their skill tree and it's actually one of the most in-depth and crazy ones yet. And not only that, but the Year of the Clockwork Knight was a huge comeback with some really cool additional mechanics, like taming clockworks. But this year is still not over, so the ranking is to be announced. If you come back to this video in a year, I'll go ahead and give my ranking for this year down in the comments, so go check those if it's been a year since well, not a year since I've released the video, but half a year, because we're already halfway through the year. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this trip through memory lane. I certainly did. It was fun to talk about each and every update line, and I know I didn't go that in-depth with it, like I didn't talk about some of the smaller additions, but I feel like I talked about the things that mattered. If you want more, click on your screen right now. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!